Previously, on Robbery Inc., I sat down with Morslyn Johnson's next of kin, Leah Johnson.
And they can take it to the bank. Like we always said, you can take that to the bank and cash it, because it will cash.
Tell me about the time that your father escaped from prison.
And of course, his kids weren't allowed in that back room, but we did sneak in there, and we did see some Tommy guns.
Do you have any idea how much money that your uncle and your father may have stolen over the course of their careers?
Their story always was, you never made enough money because you had to pay everyone you went to. Everywhere you went, you had to pay someone.
In April 1974, a group of thieves tunneled beneath Roswell Street in Marietta, Georgia, and blasted their way into the Cobb Exchange Bank vault, only to be mocked for escaping with just $1,000. But as investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a far bigger mystery in the story of a career bank robber whose daring heists and prison escapes made him a legend. This is Robbery Inc. from Georgia Public Broadcasting and the Marietta Daily Journal. It's February 6th, 2025. I'm standing outside the Marietta Theater Company on Roswell Street, my hands cupped around my eyes to peer through the glass front doors. I've been here countless times. There's black and white checkerboard tile in the lobby leading to a back hallway, branching off into an abyss I can't see from the entrance. Nearly 51 years ago, Morslyn Johnson and his crew would rent out this space and begin their dig under the road towards the Cobb Exchange Bank. Upstairs, the old Cobb County Emergency Aid Building now serves as the home of Mystic Owl Tattoo, full of artists and clients born well after 1974. When I drive across the street, I walk into I Think Financial Credit Union for the first time. Based out of Delray Beach, Florida, the credit union has 22 branches across Georgia and Florida today. The lights are bright, the staff friendly, and the amenities are what you would expect from a modern bank. I talked to a few of the employees, one of whom grew up in Marietta. Their eyes widen when I tell them about Morris. No one I talk to knows the building has been a bank for more than 50 years, let alone that there was an outlandish burglary behind the teller's counter. There are some signs of its age, a vintage steel door here and there. I read a story about a thief who stole nearly 100,000 eggs from a distribution trailer in Pennsylvania. Thanks to rising prices from shortages and a nasty bird flu, law enforcement estimate the eggs are worth about $40,000. People don't rob banks anymore. They rob chicken coops. Traffic is a steady crawl on Roswell Street by late afternoon as commuters head home after a long day's work, unaware of the history beneath their tires. The road is lined with several banks, businesses, and restaurants, a sign of Marietta's growth over the years. I make my way through the roadways, passing the Marietta Daily Journal, and through the square, the heart of the town. I end up in the Daily Grind, a locally owned coffee shop, to write this episode, just across the street from my old elementary school. I run into my 5th grade teacher, Miss Davis. It is a small town after all. She doesn't seem to recognize me. I wonder if she's retired now. And a quick Google search pulls up the blog she kept with our class, documenting our days and asking students to leave comments as homework. I'm surprised to find a picture of my class from our field trip to Rock Eagle, an annual overnight adventure to an archaeological site and children's camp in mid-Georgia. The photo was taken on November 11th, 2005. Everyone is looking off camera, likely at another parent taking our picture. I remember feeling lonely and homesick there, away from my friends in another class. I was just 10. That same day in November, more than 600 miles away, Morris Lynn Johnson was arrested by the FBI, state officials, and local police in the parking lot of a Motel 6 near Indianapolis International Airport in a sting operation. Law enforcement told TV station WTHR in Indianapolis the old man was trying to buy assault weapons for an unknown purpose. He was just 68. My name is Madison Elizabeth Hogan. You're listening to the finale of Robbery, Inc., Episode 7, The Last Great Outlaw. In our last episode, you heard from Leah Johnson, the daughter of Leon Johnson and niece of Morris Lynn Johnson. Her story, full of anecdotes and tales we've never heard from the court documents and newspaper clippings, shows us a side of this mysterious brother robbers. When her father left prison, he spent a few good years with his family, struggling to adjust to modern life, before passing just 4 years later. For MLJ, it was a different story. After 22 years in the joint, Morris was an old man by the time he joined the rest of us in society. Instead of MASH, we tuned in to vote for our favorite contestant on American Idol. Gone were the days of burning cassettes and storing vinyl. The internet came, saw, and conquered our culture. And now there was a whole new world called the web. The Berlin Wall was gone, and Morris had to adjust from the Reagan years of "this is your brain on drugs" to a post-9/11 America. Even money in banks had changed. Cash and checks were replaced with small pieces of plastic. It's a different place entirely. We know from Will Higgins' coverage in the Indy Star that MLJ spent most of his time out on parole walking trails, driving around a new Camaro. He even celebrated his 68th birthday with a party attended by 2 of his ex-wives. Very cordial. But just a month after that party, he would find himself in custody again. Station WTHR reported the following.
A paroled bank robber is under arrest on a federal weapons charge 9 months after his release following a 28-year prison sentence. A task force of federal, state, and local officers arrested 68-year-old Morris Johnson at a motel near the Indianapolis International Airport Thursday as he tried to buy several automatic and semi-automatic weapons. FBI spokeswoman Wendy Osborne says Johnson surrendered without resistance. Johnson was paroled in February. Authorities say he helped lead a gang that stole more than $2 million over 20 years. The gang was known by police as Robbery Incorporated. Johnson was once on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Osborne says she doesn't know what Johnson planned to do with the weapons.
I think we can go out on a limb here and say that MLJ was slipping back into his old ways. When I contacted the FBI to obtain records about this arrest, and any records they had on MLJ under the Freedom of Information Act, I received a letter claiming the request, quote, could reasonably be expected to constitute an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy, end quote. This is a standard boilerplate response used by the agency regarding a living person. I asked Leah about her uncle's last run-in with the law.
I was actually in Florida. I didn't get to see Morris at all, so I never got to see him. I flew in to Indiana, and I was 3 blocks from him when that was happening and didn't even know it.
So when he was arrested?
Yeah.
Talk to me about the case with the FBI after that arrest. Because didn't you have something to do with like getting the court cases and trying to get him re-released after that?
No, Morris did that one on his own. He filed entrapment, and I have all the paperwork on that case. And he got because they entrapped him. You know, they set him up to take and buy machine guns and Tommy guns, and he was going to rob banks and armored trucks. He wanted to get a couple more armored trucks, and armored trucks were our favorite.
After just 9 months, MLJ's birth as a free man would end in his return to shackles. He would spend the next 14 years in prison for parole violations and weapons charges. By the early 2010s, he had spent a majority of his life behind bars. Will Higgins tweeted a picture of Morris in his late 70s from the prison in 2013. His hairline had receded, turning gray and white. His intense blue eyes were darkened, framed by eye bags and large brown glasses. He wore a standard prison uniform in light olive green and cotton white undershirt, his lips slightly parted like in all his other pictures. In the Indy Star, he was quoted,
"I never tried to get in the papers or get famous. The more people knew what you looked like, the worse it was. You'd escape and then some old hotel clerk would recognize you. Nope, publicity was never your friend."
He wouldn't set foot out of prison again till May 21st, 2019, when he was 81 years old. The world had passed him by in a cruel blink. If 2005 was a culture shock to Morris, by 2019, it was an alien planet. But where in the world was Morris Lynn Johnson? There were no records, no paper trail, no newspaper announcements. Leah was my last clue.
But anyways, Morris won the lawsuit on the entrapment, but the parole board refused to let him stay home, and they took him back to prison and violated his parole. So he did do his time, and he made it, and he came home, and he made it 2 years, almost 3 years, I think, alive when he came home.
That's right. Morris Lynn Johnson was dead. From Leah's accounts, her uncle was placed in a nursing home sometime in September 2021 and died shortly later in October. Leah never saw her uncle following his release in 2019, but from her accounts, he must have passed just before his 84th birthday. There was no obituary, which Leah believes was intentional, to keep his name out of the papers. So I know you didn't get to see your uncle, unfortunately, when he did make it home, but can you recount anything that you remember of what life was like for him when he was released from prison?
I don't think Morris adjusted like Dad did, because he was so much more of a luxury like. And my dad, we can live in the woods. But Morris, he liked his silk shirts, his clothing, his hair, I mean, he was a very well-dressed, proper man and well-spoken. And, Dad and me, as you can tell, we don't care. Or you get what you get. And I think Morris had it harder than my dad did when he came home from prison, And he couldn't, I don't know. Because like I said, I didn't never really get to talk to him and see him, and I wanted to. But I was in Florida at that time, and unfortunately our timing and bumping. And like when he came home, I went to the nursing home, and I could find him, and they had him hid, probably because of newspapers and all that.
The first time I had ever heard about the Cobb Exchange Bank and the Mission Impossible burglary, MLJ had been dead for at least a year. Up until my first conversation with Leah on the phone, we had no idea he had passed. I want to bring us back to that FBI FOIA I submitted. But the time I sent my records request to the agency, MLJ was long gone. I was given the opportunity to appeal the rejection if I could prove MLJ was indeed deceased by obtaining a certified death certificate. A death certificate can only be requested by a family member in Indiana. You see wherein the issue lies. This wasn't something I was willing to ask Leah for. But I had to know more about who this man was, the leader of Robbery Inc. So your uncle and your father would arm themselves to go commit these robberies, but they typically never committed acts of violence. Why was that?
They never wanted to hurt nobody. We just wanted to help people that needed stuff. It was like Robin Hood. And then it became a joke because the police, they wanted to take him beyond them, so then they just started making a joke out of it, and then the joke just got out of control to where things started, they accused him. So then they went and showed him, okay, you want to accuse me? Okay, I'll do it. And it just escalated and never stopped.
So, according to some records, it's alleged that over 300 people were robbing banks for the Johnson family, or they were part of some kind of organization robbing banks, and that they allegedly stole over $2 million as an organization. And the police coined this phrase, Robbery Inc. That's what they called this unofficial organization. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
We believe that if you run with the gang, then you're a wimp. You don't have gangs. You're the controller. You're the leader. You don't need nobody else. Yes, there was many people around, little kids that got their houses full of fruit and toys, and, that's where the Robbery Inc. came in place, I think, because of the people that they helped and where we went and our friends and the people that stayed around, and things like that. There was no big corporation. It was my dad and my Uncle Morris and Frankie Rance, and of course there was a few others. Bill Kindler's passed away now too, but they're main buddies. You never have more than 3 people. 3 people is conspiracy. You get more time for conspiracy. So therefore you only keep 2 people. You never have more than 2.
Who is the last great outlaw? This was the first question I asked you when we began our story. After our tales of prison breaks, bank jobs, and men on the run, maybe your answer has changed. Maybe it hasn't. It's April 24th, 2025. More than 50 years have passed since Morris Lynn Johnson blasted a hole in the floor of the Cobb Exchange Bank. Everything has changed. The building isn't even the Cobb Exchange anymore. Life has kept her promise of change and erosion. Gone are the days of notorious bank robbers, pulling off heists straight out of a Hollywood script. Today, there's cashless banks, cryptocurrency pump and dumps, and online scammers in every email inbox in America. The age of the bank outlaw has come and gone. When I think about Morris, about the life he lived, the tales he told, the jobs he ran, I always go back to those safe deposit boxes in the Cobb Exchange Bank. Despite rumors and even firsthand accounts, which I do believe to be misremembered, there's no evidence that I can find that confirms they were tampered with. On the contrary, there's more evidence to indicate they weren't. Regardless, I think about why they were left alone, and I've come to 2 possible outcomes. The realist in me thinks, from MLJ's criminal point of view, that the job was hot enough after the bank alarms had brought the police to the scene not once, but twice that night already. If law enforcement had left as early as 4 a.m., that would only leave about 4 more hours until bank personnel would arrive to open the vault. After scoping the joint out for over 2 months across the street, I'm sure Morris and his team knew the comings and goings of the employees. They needed to get going before daybreak, which would have been around 7 a.m., to avoid anyone possibly noticing their movements on the busy road. Time was not on their side. The romantic in me wants to believe that Morris left the safe deposit box alone, on purpose. From what I can gather about him, he was an honest thief. Make no mistake, Morris Lynn Johnson led a life of crime, violence, and hedonism, driven by what I can only assume is a psychological and spiritual malady seen in many criminals like him. Whether you buy into the whole Robin Hood narrative or not, MLJ's legacy as a career thief isn't noble any more than it is cowardly. In all actuality, I think it was simple for him. Robbing banks was like second nature, like breathing. It's just what he did. The thrill, the money, the notoriety, the chase, it was all an afterthought. Nothing came before the job. He did it because he could. I'm even more inclined to believe this because he was beyond rehabilitation, spending most of his life behind bars due to his compulsion to steal. But I don't think he ever set out to take from the little guy. This was a man who knocked over banks, not houses. At the end of the day, the money was always insured, the banks recovered, and private citizens were more or less victimless. It's why Midwesterners, the country's little guys, took a liking to Morris. I want to believe he left those safe deposit boxes alone because he knew they were someone else's, full of mementos, heirlooms, and keepsakes that didn't belong to him. He just wasn't that guy. But we'll never know. Morris Lynn Johnson lies in a grave at the Floral Park Cemetery in South Indianapolis, where he was buried in October 2021. His final resting place, an earthly safe deposit box, holds his secrets under eternal lock and key. Who was the last great outlaw? Notorious Indiana gangster John Dillinger, who everybody has heard of, robbed 24 banks and 4 police stations, escaping from 2 prisons over the course of his life. On the other hand, Morris Lynn Johnson, who nobody's ever heard of, pulled at least 3 dozen bank jobs and escaped from prison successfully 3 times, with several more attempts. Bonnie and Clyde, everybody's favorite criminal couple, never stole more than $1,500 in a single run, which is worth about $28,500 by today's money. Morris and Laura Kay, on the other hand, stole $100,000 in a single bank robbery in 1974, which was worth more than $500,000. Lightning struck twice when Morris was able to steal another $100,000 in a separate job. Billy the Kid, a famous gunslinger who's been represented in TV shows and movies time and time again, had a criminal career that lasted only 5 years, from the time he was 15 till he was killed at 21. Now, Morris may have started late at 20 years old, but he also finished later, at 68 years old. Jesse James lived and died as a Robin Hood legend, stealing from the rich to give to the poor, even though there's no evidence he and the James Younger gang ever shared their bounty. Morris Lynn Johnson and his Robbery Inc. bandits, on the other hand, were known for their generosity, heavily documented that they would hand out bikes and TVs to families in their Indy neighborhood. Of the bank robberies we've mentioned to you in this podcast, Morris Lynn Johnson stole at least $2 million by today's standards. But we estimate that number is even greater. Only the FBI knows the exact number, and they're not sharing it anytime soon. So who was the last great outlaw? My money is on Morris Lynn Johnson. Robbery Inc. is a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting and the Marietta Daily Journal. Robbery Inc. is written and hosted by Madison Elizabeth Hogan. I'm on Instagram at Madison Elizabeth Hogan. This podcast was produced and edited by GPB's podcast team of Jeremy Powell, Jake Cook, and Mark Davenport. Special thanks to Olivia Watkin, Jaden Henson, and Rachel Kellogg.